We are talking how to eat well for adults with ADHD. My guest is Becca King. Let me tell you a little bit about Becca. That's the name of her book that I think you should definitely get if you have ADHD or you know somebody who does, or if you just want really streamlined recipe ideas. Okay, so let me tell you about Becca. Becca is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified intuitive eating counselor from Charlotte, North Carolina. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Public Health with a minor in Women's Studies from the University of South Carolina and a Master of Science in Human Nutrition from Winthrop University. Becca is an adult with ADHD who struggled for years with disordered eating and chronic dieting, eventually healing her relationship with food through intuitive eating. In July of 2020, she founded the ADHD Nutritionist to help ADHDers work with their brains so they can eat in a way that makes them feel their best mentally and physically. So yeah, she's amazing. She's got over 200,000 followers on Instagram. She goes by the ADHD Nutritionist on there. We'll link that up, but definitely give her a follow. Her content's amazing. And yeah, I'm super excited to introduce her book to you, How to Eat Well for Adults with ADHD. We will put the link in the show notes here. And yeah, I think you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. Here is Becca King. Okay, so Becca, ADHD, people, and food. Straight up, if you just saw somebody on the street and they were like, "Hi, random person, I have ADHD. What would you recommend in terms of nutrition?" What would you want? What would be the first thing that you would tell them?
Ooh, yeah, my first thing is making sure that you are eating regularly. So eating every 3 to 4 hours, that is something a lot of my clients struggle with. Is I think of that as kind of like the foundation, like
Wow.
getting the pattern of eating and feeding yourself regularly. Because a lot of ADHDers will get in the cycle of like the binge restrict cycle of like not eating all day and then overeating or binge eating at night.
Mhm.
That I find is really helpful for a lot of my clients is kind of developing almost like a scaffolding or a little bit of a structure-ish. It can be a little fluid or flexible, but trying to
Yeah.
eat regularly because that helps with blood sugar, keeping our blood sugar stable, which is important for ADHD traits. Um, and that'll help keep our energy and our emotions a little more stable too. So
Yeah, nice. Okay, let's stay on this one for a second. I like this. So, yeah, because probably many people on ADHD are probably on, medications that are stimulants and then they're not hungry and all of that. And even if you weren't on a medication, I can see how ADHD people would fall into this because you might just get really excited about something and you get locked
yeah.
into it or whatever. So what do they need to understand in terms of, like you said, their blood sugar that's going to keep that stable? How does that impact what they're experiencing?
Yeah, so there's some research to show that like the big fluctuations in blood sugar can impact our traits. So you might notice noticing your ADHD more basically. So like a lot of people, especially like sugar, is like, oh, sugar is, bad for ADHD, all that kind of stuff. And it's like it's not
Mhm.
necessarily the sugar itself, it's the impact on our blood sugar. And obviously sugar has a much greater effect than other types of carbs, on our blood sugar. So it makes sense to me
Mhm.
that it would kind of have that impact. So you might notice kind of that blood sugar fluctuation impacting
Mhm.
your traits. So
Okay, I don't know if you can speak on this, but, like, okay, so my brother was diagnosed with ADD back in the day, right? And, my mom was, like, always on his case about his blood sugar, like, she noticed that, okay? And it would drive him
yeah.
crazy. But me with, like, my son, I'm pretty sure we haven't got him diagnosed, but pretty like, we just kinda just, uh talk to him like he does, like he's aware, and for him, I've noticed that like if his blood sugar goes too low, he gets more it's not like your typical hangry, okay? Like it's something else.
Yeah.
It's like he's not him anymore. He's not just irritable. It's
Yeah.
like beyond,
Like the
like it's like
Snickers, like the Snicker bars commercial where you like turn into a completely different person.
it's like that, yeah. So he's had to learn to not let it get that far because he's, like, very brilliant and good at putting things together, and he can, like, get all, locked into something, and then before you know it, it's like, you
Interest
passed the tipping point, you know. And I have seen, I wouldn't say it's every time, but I have seen with like maybe too much sugar, he he does get pretty goofy and like kind of likes to tease his siblings and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So would you say that's pretty typical in term, or what have you experienced? What can people, um how should I say this? What might people notice as a result of blood sugar going too low or too high with ADHD?
Yeah. So energy dips, I mean, you might struggle with being able to like kind of all the typical ADHD traits, like you might struggle with being able to pay attention.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're crashing, like sugar is the way we get dopamine. So if you think about it that way, like it would make sense, like the crash part, if that's crashing, you're gonna start looking for other ways to get your dopamine levels back up, and things like
Right.
making fights and things like that are ways that we get stimulation, strangely. So that would make sense to me, that could happen.
Okay. Okay. And
Yeah. And a lot of folks might find, like, I've worked with a lot of particularly women who get diagnosed later in life, and they will find that they've kind of
mm,
self-medicated with with carbs, just kind of and
yeah.
sugar, especially. But like they'll be like, I am someone who's always, yeah, like, that's just they're getting dopamine from that food, and they don't realize it until they get diagnosed, because they're like, I'm someone who's not ever hungry, but I'm always feel like I'm eating all the time because I'm bored or just like need
Mhm.
something to do. Like I don't know why. And then they get diagnosed and like, oh,
Mhm.
especially if they get medicated, and then they're like, oh, I don't feel this like need to
Mhm.
eat in the same way. Like, yes, it does suppress your appetite to some degree, but like it also, it's like, oh, my brain is
Mhm.
getting the dopamine that it needs, so it doesn't like need this food in that way anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that myself, and I've talked to clients about it too. It's like when you're like, notice when you're reaching for food for the brain effect versus
Ah,
my stomach is hungry, like my body is hungry right now. Cause that's a clue for you, is like I most likely need some dopamine, serotonin.
yeah.
It's just it's feedback. It's like,
Yep.
versus if we shame ourselves and like, "Oh, just shouldn't," or whatever,
Yeah.
you're missing that self-awareness piece that can come in through it. Yeah. So I love that you're helping
Yeah.
people
And because
notice
it's like
that.
sometimes that might be the only tool you have around too. So it's like
Right.
shaming yourself for it. It's like, okay, well, if that's what's successful, like I've had clients do that before, like that's all I had. And like I was still able to like eat mindfully. I didn't like, overeat or binge or anything.
Right.
I needed that, and it helped me get through the rest of my day. And that was okay. So yeah, I agree with you. Like, yeah, shaming yourself, it just it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. It doesn't help any scenario ever.
Nope.
I mean, except for, noticing that you're shaming yourself can be a
Yeah.
clue that something's going on. Okay, so, you talked about having, I love how you said, what did you say? You're like structured-ish, flexible structure. Yep, that's like
Yep.
my middle name, flexible structure, middle name. So I love that because you're a proponent of intuitive eating
Yes.
for people with ADHD. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, I personally, I have ADHD and I struggled with an eating disorder. And so for me, I kind of went down the intuitive eating path after trying all of these diets and things to stop binge eating, and I couldn't stop binge eating. So I was like, why don't I try intuitive eating? I've tried everything else. And it was kind of the thing that clicked and kind of helped me like break my brain out of like trying to do things in the way everybody else is doing things, or
Yeah.
feeding myself in that way. And I think intuitive eating kind of gave me the permission to explore like how to feed myself in a way that works for me without binge
Mhm.
eating.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I take that approach. And I have found that it works
Mhm.
pretty well. I think of it as like removing the shoulds, is how I will explain it to people who don't know what intuitive eating is. And like it's removing the
Mhm.
shoulds, so you have space to figure out how to feed yourself in a way that makes you feel your best mentally and physically. And
Yeah.
that will look different for everyone. It's not going to be
Mhm.
the same. And I think doing it that way kind of helps a lot, gives people permission to do that. And they're like, oh, cool. Like
Yeah.
it's okay if I don't do, the way that I cook isn't the way that my friend cooks, or, if the snacks that I bring with me aren't the things that my other friends, have or whatever. It makes
Yeah,
it a little
nice.
bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, even for people without ADHD, like the hyper, focus on tracking every morsel of food, like that doesn't work for a lot of people. And as soon as somebody comes in they're like, I have a history of eating disorders and I'm still kind of struggling with like binge or I'm like, there's no freaking way I'm going to push
Yeah.
you deeper into that
Oh,
pattern
yeah.
with food
Oh,
control or whatever.
yeah.
And it's so cool for people to heal.
Yes.
I'm not saying sometimes they're for the right client, they're really in a good place with food and they're like, I
Yeah.
don't see any red flags
Every
and they
once in a while, I'll have a client who's like, I'm gonna track, and I'm like, cool, I have a journal you can use, but I like
right, right.
always let my clients know, I'm like, it's not, I don't force you to do it. I usually turn the nutrition side of things off for my clients if they journal in my little journal that I have, I can turn it off.
Mm,
If you want to log what you're
mm,
eating, you can, but you won't see the like information if that's helpful for you.
right, right,
But yeah, it's for a lot of ADHDers, it's very either or, like you become hyper fixated with it
right,
and
right.
obsessed. And have definitely been there. I was like, used to feel like I was a walking my fitness pal. And then I have other, clients who like, they can even remembering to eat is a big win. So it's like adding an extra step to like get out a journal or get on your phone and type in everything you eat just adds a whole another process to eating, which makes it more
Mm-hmm.
complicated and overwhelming a lot of times. And then again, the shame comes in with like, my first job was in a weight loss clinic, and I remember someone, a lot of my clients that had ADHD at this clinic couldn't keep up with their journals, and no one in the clinic could understand why. Like, it's not that hard to journal. I just don't get why people
Wow.
won't do it. And then I go look in their chart. I'm like, they have ADHD. Like that is
It's
why.
so much. That's so much to ask. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
On top of juggling all the crazy like diet rules, that this program had was a lot. So
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, and I'm sure you've seen it many times too. It's like I'm sure it's social media provoked, but it's like it's almost like there's this concept that the only way you can lose weight is by tracking all your food, and that is not true. Like
yeah.
if you need to lose weight, and that's a whole nother topic, because a lot of people don't even really need to lose weight. There's just this other stuff going on. But like I have seen time and time again, and I know you have too, is like, I got in a healthier relationship with food, and then I stopped binging, and then like I got into a healthier weight, and I also realized I already was kind of at a healthy weight. You see that kind of
Yeah.
healing happen
Yeah.
when people stop kind of leading with so much control and fear.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it doesn't, I feel like tracking, it does teach you some things to some degree, but it doesn't teach
Yeah.
you tune tune into your body
Right.
at all. Or like, am I meeting my needs with this meal? Like the
Right.
calories or even sometimes the macros, they might not be what you need at that meal. You might need more or you might need less.
Right.
And
Right.
you know that way more than any calorie counting thing or macro tracker
Right.
would ever tell you that
Right.
information.
Yep, yep. It's like it is. I call it an awareness practice. Okay,
Yeah.
get the awareness and without shame or guilt or shoulds or control, and then because sometimes some facets are helpful, right? It's like, oh, I'm like hardly eating any protein at all.
Yeah.
Like, okay, got it. I see. Like that's great.
Yeah.
You found out. All right, let's move on. Okay, so another thing that you talk about is like I've seen on your Instagram, like you're sharing tips about like kind of how to make it like fast and easy and accessible for you to eat healthy. Can you speak on that and why that matters and
Yeah.
insights there?
I think it is a privilege to be able to like have the
Yeah.
time. And for people with ADHD, like the executive function piece to be able to cook all of your meals from scratch, like every single part of the process from like deciding what to eat to going to the grocery store to prepping the ingredients and cooking them and then doing the dishes, all of that requires executive function. And it's a lot for people with ADHD. So taking those shortcut, like I call it like convenience types of food
Yeah.
shortcuts. Get
Yeah.
yourself the rice packet, get yourself the jar of minced garlic so you don't have to do that every time you cook, and
Right.
save some steps in the process so it feels more doable when you walk into the kitchen. It's not like I have to do 20 things in here just to get a meal. It's like,
Right.
okay, well, this feels more approachable. And I think like doing those kind of things can help, especially if I work with a lot of clients who are like, they are relying on fast food or takeout. And, not that that's necessarily bad, but they're like, also my wallet does not like this, you know?
Yeah.
So it can
Yeah.
be that nice middle ground between, I think, like, you know, only eating out or like cooking everything from scratch. Like there has to be a
Mm-hmm.
middle of the road between those two things. Cause I think a lot of people just look at can like any food that's not just like whole food. They're like, oh, that's going to be bad. It's like, but it can help us get in the nutrition that we need. And there are
Mm-hmm.
types of foods that do have lots of nutrition in them, and serve a purpose for us, like canned beans. I'm not gonna soak beans. That's just not like happening. I remember opening up a recipe once and it was like a 3-step recipe and it started off with like soak beans for 8 hours. And I said, nope, I don't know why that's considered an easy thing. I'm like, it probably is, but I'm like, I could just open a can of beans and use it. Like that's easier. And like, that's okay.
Yeah, there's this what's the word? Like fantasy person in me that's like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna sprout all of 'em," and it just doesn't happen. Props to you guys who are living that lifestyle. That's
Yeah.
super rad and I respect it. And you have to be real with yourself sometimes
Yeah.
if you're not that person. And yeah, like a quick example for me is if I if I'm gonna cook meat, I'm gonna cook so much freaking meat so that I don't have to actually cook for a while. Or and eggs are like my meat backup, my protein backup, or
Yeah.
Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, right? Like those are kind of my backups if I don't have something. And then like my friend, I live on the Big Island of Hawaii and I live on the Hilo side. We don't have a Costco here, but there is one on the other side of the island, a couple hours away. So if you have a Costco by you or like a lot of convenience, just know how fortunate you are because I'm living with a little bit less of that now. And it's like, okay, you guys are so lucky if you have a Costco like really close to you. But she brought these like Brussels sprouts that are frozen with like bacon in them. And I just literally just put them in the pan with some avocado oil and cracked some eggs on it. And it was so good. And I was like, yes, so just having things like that, like, oh my gosh,
The Kevin's,
game
that
changer.
Kevin brand, they've got some really good like like their sous vide cooked little pouch type things. They've
Who
got like
does?
it's called Kevin's.
Okay.
They're definitely at Costco.
Okay.
I had like a garlic chicken one from them the other night, but they have like a curry one that I've done that's really good. So it's
Ooh.
like, you can microwave it in the little pouch with the sauce and you just mix it up and it's just quick and easy. It's already cooked, so you just have to reheat it basically. And it's tasty and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
finding there's things you don't like to cook for like my clients have ADHD. I'm like, figure out the things you don't like to
Yeah.
deal with as much and find workarounds for them. Like, I don't really like touching raw meat, so I will like wear gloves, for instance. Like, it's just like a sensory thing.
Nice.
I will
Okay.
wear
Yeah.
rubber gloves when I'm handling it, or I buy things that are like stuff I can put in the air fryer so I don't have to like from frozen,
Yeah.
or things that are kind of like
Nice.
cooked to save some of that, like because I've had let meat go bad. Sorry.
Just
Uh,
from the resistance, you're like, okay, let me just, it was kind of like what you were saying of these are the snacks I bring. It's like, this is how I do it. I wear gloves and I'm just going to do that instead of trying to force myself or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
it is. Yeah, figuring out if there's any barriers. Sometimes it's like, oh, the dishes is a barrier for a lot of ADHDers. It's just that endless task we have to do, and it's not that fun. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
So finding ways to like make that more accessible for you. Or some of my clients keep like paper plates on hand and they're like, I know this isn't like the best environmentally friendly option, but if it means that like I will actually cook a meal and eat it because I have
Yeah.
like dishes to eat off of, um,
Right. Yeah.
that'll help. So
You mentioned I kind of wanted to hit a little bit because you mentioned you work with a lot of women with
yeah,
ADHD.
yeah.
So I don't know if you have this data. Is are eating disorders very correlated with ADHD in general, or with women, or what's the story there?
I don't know if we have as much statistics on men with eating disorders and ADHD yet. Like, but there is a lot of research with women with eating disorders, but unfortunately, like eating disorder research is pretty skewed toward,
Okay.
I'd say that's like one areas where it's like, oh, we use women in this a lot. But there is research to show that like people with ADHD are 3 to 5 times, or girls are 3 to 5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder and are more
Mm,
likely to develop more severe eating disorders than someone who doesn't have
really?
ADHD. So
Mm,
binge eating and bulimia are what the research shows, those are the most common. I think ARFID, which is a little bit of a more of a less known eating disorder or a newer one. I think that one will also, like the rates of that will increase as more people know what it is, because it's called avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So it's like almost
Mm.
not the best terminology, but like extreme picky eating is kind of like the easiest way to think about it, of like their eating disorder is not stemming from like a weight, like body image type of thing. It's often they have a lot of sensory issues with food
Mm.
or trauma around food, that makes it really hard to eat. Um,
Wow.
so it's kind of what, like, when parents are like, oh, if you just, like eventually the kid will eat kind of thing. If you just put the food there, they'll eat, put the broccoli there, they'll
Mm.
eat it eventually because they'll get hungry enough. Kids with ARFID will not eat it if they
Mm.
don't like it, no matter how
Mm.
hungry they get, kind of thing. So
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm making an assumption here, but I'm thinking like, okay, with binging and bulimia and you have ADHD and maybe you don't know you have ADHD and you're literally that it's like the only way you're medicating to get to just normal baseline dopamine levels. And then you're living in this society where it's like be skinny and you're like, "Uh-oh, what do I do? Let me just puke it all up." Like it kind of is really understandable. Like it sucks, but that's why good information is needed, right?
Yeah,
To
and it can often be like overlooked in eating disorder treatment. And so folks will
Mm.
just really be struggling, and it's like there's this missing component here that
Mhm.
that's not getting addressed. So that's why recovery isn't happening. And then
Mhm.
eventually like, oh, they'll get diagnosed. It's like, oh wow, now we understand this and can like then this whole other avenue has opened up, or it can kind of be that like missing, it was for me, that missing puzzle piece with things like, oh, how does my ADHD relate? Like I think of it as like what's ADHD related, and then like what's stemming from like diet culture and like just societal pressures, around
Mhm.
bodies.
Mhm.
Because separating it, kind of figuring that out helps a lot too. Of like, oh, this is like, I'm restricting or have the urge to restrict because, because of diet culture or because that food's considered bad or whatever, versus
Right.
like, oops, I genuinely forgot to eat because I wasn't hungry. Like being able to understand your behavior
Mhm.
better.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. I was curious about protein because I know for me, like, maybe it's the blood sugar stabilization effect, or maybe it's the tyrosine and, helping you make more dopamine. But for me, eating more protein was an absolute game changer on like my mind working right. And then my son was the same thing. Like, he wanted to climb up a mountain and be like, hey, everybody, eat
Yeah.
more protein. That's kind of how you feel. So, do you
Yeah.
have thoughts on that with
Yeah, I
protein?
would definitely agree. I think I find that getting more protein in helps, especially for a lot of my, like if you find you're always still hungry, probably need more protein. I've had a lot of clients who that is the case. They're like, I need more protein once we kind of start working together.
Yeah.
Because I think generally, like when in like we learn as dietitians, we're like most people get enough protein, but like I would argue ADHDers, we like carbs more. So like we actually should be actively focusing on getting in enough protein, even just like if you're, especially if you're on the lower end of things, like just try and just start off getting
Right.
enough. Because I've had some clients who've like worked with a trainer or something, and they end up getting these ridiculous protein goals. And I'm like, you're not even like, we're not even at 50% of that right now. So like, let's eat, like, if you want to
Right.
eat protein and you want to work towards that, awesome. I will help you. But for now, like, we gotta get in that somewhere in the middle there, because that's like, you're trying to,
Mhm.
jump from the bottom rung to the top rung. And that's not
Mhm. Mhm.
gonna easy, because it feels like sometimes a lot to increase your protein intake. So
Yeah, and usually your digestion can't handle that big of a jump at once anyway,
yeah.
so, okay, yeah, yeah, and I think just the blood sugar stabilization effect for many people can be kind of shocking. It's like, oh, especially if you're prone to carbs and candies and all these things, because 'cause you're just like, we were," all day, and you're like, "Why am I so hungry?" And then you start boosting some protein and veggies and things,
Ah,
and you're like, "Whoa, that did help." I did notice a difference, so,
yeah, protein and fiber, I would say, like for most
yeah.
people, but like especially for ADHDers, like those two things um, are really important. There was a research, I just saw someone post something, I need to go read it. Um, about fiber and ADHD, and I was like, yes, I knew it, because like it was a newer study about it helping with some
Oh, cool.
ADHD. And I was
Okay.
um,
Nice. With women, like especially like I'm 42, and I definitely would say in my generation, like I think I knew of one girl in middle school who had ADHD. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It was all
yeah.
boys,
Oh
right? So
yeah.
I feel like there's like a whole generation of women who haven't even been considered on this. So I mean, I know that's not your you're not like diagnosing people with ADHD or something like that, but can you share just like some common experiences of women with ADHD that maybe they might not be aware of that you've observed?
Like in relation to food, or just in
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, you if it goes out of it a little bit, but
yeah.
it's fine. But just yeah,
Yeah.
sure, with nutrition and their
Yeah.
bodies and
Yeah. I find there's a really interesting intersection between like ableism and anti-fat bias. So there's kind of some data to show that like especially like women who are in larger bodies and then are also have ADHD, they're more likely to experience more ableism. So they often will be more likely to seek out the thin ideal and engage probably in disordered behaviors to
mm,
try and kind of compensate for that,
mm,
and kind of not had to deal with, the unfortunate and awful comments that people will make. But a lot of times people, it's you're not trying hard enough or just meal prep. And you're like, I just can't make myself, spend hours in the kitchen and I don't eat the same thing every day.
mm,
A lot of clients like yo-yo dieting because like Dr. Hollowell, who's like an ADHD expert, he says ADHDers are consistently inconsistent. And I'm like, dieting requires this like level of consistency to be successful at it. That might not be realistic for a lot of folks who have ADHD and are consistently inconsistent when it's like one of those, really rigid diets where it's
mhm,
like, oh,
mhm,
like, oh, you're out of your fast, you're not fast in the fasting window, you messed up. So a
mhm,
lot of clients
mhm,
like will do yo-yo dieting. I think fad dieting is more appealing to ADHD brains too, because it's
mm.
um,
Exciting, kind of almost.
exciting, instant
Yeah.
quick results, which are what our brains like, is that,
Yeah.
instant results. So it's like, ooh, lose 30 pounds in 30 days and you'll do this. And you're like, and so you're like, ooh, I'll try all these things. And the eating fiber and eating protein and eating regularly, drinking water isn't as glamorous and exciting. It's like I've heard that so many times.
Right,
Uh,
right.
so I think there's a lot of shame I've heard from a lot of
Mm,
parents. Like they feel like they're not good at being an adult, quote unquote, because
right,
they struggle with
right.
feeding themselves, and there's just a lot of shame
Mm,
there around that. Um, you know, feeling like you know, everyone else around me can feed themselves. Why can't I? Kind
mhm,
of thing. Or why can't I just do this thing I really want? I want to diet or I want to lose weight. But like being able to follow through with some things can be really hard.
mhm.
And sticking to things can be hard. So
Mhm. Well, that's why I'm glad you wrote this book because like you have all these ADHD friendly recipes and easy meals and snacks and like I was just getting ready to draft up a post today because I had a call with a client yesterday who was beating herself up for eating like sour candy, her kids candies and stuff.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, no worries. I'm like, so like what ideas do you have like in your mind and in your house for when you do want something sweet? And she like could only come up with like one thing, like yogurt or something. And I was like, okay, well, let's make like a bigger list because like I'd be eating that crap too if that was the only like sweet thing I ever had around. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I feel like have us being able to have quick 80 I mean just ADHD or not, but probably especially ADHD people having like this whole like quick easy solution list like on autopilot and in your house and you don't have to like plan it out. You just like make sure you have those things in your house. Like it's probably the way to go for anyone, but I would say especially if your executive function isn't always doing what you want it to. So tell us a little bit more about the book. Like, what is in the book? By the
So
way, it's called How to Eat Well for Adults with ADHD.
yeah, so it's basically a non-diet guide to feeding yourself. So I kind of
Nice.
go through like some of the chapters are titled like why is it so hard to listen to my body? And then talking about like why
Mm,
it can be hard to hear or recognize hunger and fullness.
nice.
Like what can you do about that? Or why am I so consistently inconsistent kind of thing? And, talking about
Mm.
your eating pattern. So it kind of goes through kind of like all the things I really talk about on social media, just in much greater depth. So kind of talking about like, hey, what do I do about eating for stimulation? Because that's a big thing. So like, what do I do about that? How do I, you know, um, navigate that situation so that like it's not like because it's unrealistic to say you're never going to do it. So it's like, how can I create a toolkit, and I talked about that in the book of like how to kind of create a toolkit for stimulation, and emotional regulation too. So that way, like food doesn't just become the
Mm.
go-to for those things when we're having big emotions or we're bored or whatever. We have other tools, and food can be a part of that toolkit. But I think, obviously it being the only thing in that toolkit probably isn't going to make for a great relationship with food. So
Oh yeah, can we pause on this one real quick? Because I saw on your Instagram a post where you were talking about this eating for stimulation, and you're like, here's some other ideas of things you could do, like when you sit down to watch TV and you still
yeah.
need more stimulation than just the TV. And I was telling my son, and I was like, guess what? One of the things she said was, he's like, crocheting. I was like, yep, you got it, because he does, because that's how he is. He's
I
like, this is
love it.
not. He crochets like crazy. It's so cool. He's like making little stuff for
Yeah.
his friends and whatnot. But it's just not enough stimulation for
Oh,
him to just sit there and
I
So
did friendship
that was
bracelets when I was in like high school. I remember I started doing that before I knew I had ADHD. I would sit in front of the TV and make like friendship bracelets because I needed
perfect.
something else to do. So yeah, TV is not stimulating for ADHD brains. It usually isn't. So usually do something else. Most people with ADHD will watch TV and do one or maybe two other things while
Right.
watching TV. So finding other things, and food's just so easy to accompany eat like watching TV. So and then you're not very connected with the food, so it can you know also
Mhm.
leads to that lovely overeating or binge eating. So I think finding other
Mhm.
people when you're like, I'm just looking for stimulation, like I have little fidgets in my hands, and I will just sometimes I just know I need something in my hands. And this
Yeah.
having that, like one of my exes used to just like would throw me. I had like a little squishy ball, and he would throw one to me and be like, can you please? Because I'd get up and like go do things, but be like, I'm trying to watch a show with you. Can you please like sit down and stay seated? And it was like, I just need something else to do, or I'll be on my phone. And obviously, when you're watching your show with someone else, they don't like that very much. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So I kind of cut you off, stopped you on that one. Was there anything else you were thinking to share of in the
Oh, and like dealing with the executive functioning piece of like how to simplify meal planning and grocery shop, kind of going through like every step in that process from deciding what to eat to doing the dishes. We kind of go through, there's a whole
nice.
chapter on how to like simplify some of those processes because it's a lot. So kind of going through that, and like you said, the recipes are really great too. And they're a little bit more, I tried to make them as ADHD friendly as possible. So they're not things that are like, as much as I love a lot of food bloggers, they're not like really complicated food blogger type of recipes. They're things that are really simple, or I have things that, little tips of how to make things a little bit shorter or workarounds for things. And I also include all the like utensils and things that you would need for a recipe. Um,
Oh, nice.
because I know for some people, like trying to get everything out can be hard, or like, what do I need to get started? So that can kind of
Mm.
eliminate some of the like uncertainty there.
Yeah, I feel like your book could be like how to, hold on, what is it? How to eat well for adults with ADHD, and also for adults who ain't got no time for that. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean? Either or.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really glad that you're speaking up about like a lot of the shaming. I find that like when we don't understand ourselves, that shaming piece like comes in so unnecessarily, and it's like, no, 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 you're not making excuses. No, no,
Oh,
you're not
yeah.
bad. I know, doesn't that hurt your heart? I know I'm just making excuses. I'm like, no, come here. Like, let's validate what are you experiencing? What are okay.
Yeah.
That sounds valid.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like
Now
feeling like that because it's like chopping vegetables, I just can't, like it takes too long, and I can't, like I don't know how to do it. Like I've had that happen before. I was like, it's gonna take me 45 minutes to cut up the vegetables for this recipe. So like, and like I have had clients have that experience before. So like, I'm not gonna do it. And I feel so bad because I want to eat vegetables, but and so trying to
right.
navigate all that.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
think, especially with social media nowadays, people see people do things, and I'm like, I watch things and I'm like, that's so great. I'm so glad that that works for you. But I would don't, nope, nope. And then I've had a client sent me things and they're like, do I have to do this? And I was like, no, why would you have to do that?
I know. I remember once I saw this was when I was in the keto world more, and I saw somebody like make a lattice like basket weave of bacon like baked on an avocado, and I thought I would not eat hell. I know there's those people out there that they like that but for me, I would just be like, nope, we're going out. If I have to basket weave bacon,
No.
nope. But to each their own. So yeah, I'm glad you're making this accessible and also just normalizing the experience of
Yeah.
food for people with ADHD. So because it is unfair, the self-judgment and the shame and that I should not be like this and I should fall into this other mold when like really if you know you have ADHD, I hope you know by now that you have like freaky superpowers also because of it and it is so good in so many ways that you are not
Yeah.
like other people and like just embracing that also with the way that you eat and the way that you roll and like finding your own groove and your own what makes you
Yeah.
feel optimal is so like people deserve that, you know, and they
Yeah.
deserve to understand how they tick and talk and have their experience normalized. So thanks for taking that on. You know, I just feel like it's so awesome that not only
Yeah.
did you get very educated in nutrition, but you also have it yourself and are helping others along with that is really cool.
Just, yeah, it should be. It is really nice to like normalize things for people. And then it's really great to hear like I'm eating, I'm actually eating, I'm getting in more protein now because I actually let myself buy pre-made protein shakes because I wasn't, even just the simplest like, oh, putting the powder in the shaker bottle and then I have to clean the shake. Remember to get it
Right.
out of my car and bring it into my house and clean it. And I never remember to do that. But I
Right.
get this pre-made protein shake and I'm actually getting it down every day.
Exactly.
And I notice how
Exactly.
much better I'm feeling doing that. Or I'm eating,
Yeah.
someone told me the other day, like or earlier today, I gave myself permission to use frozen vegetables and I'm eating more vegetables than I've eaten in my adult life. And it's like
Right.
awesome. You just have to
Yeah.
like normalize things and find like, I think we're like the idea that you're going to do things differently and that is okay. Um,
Yeah.
and embracing that, I think
Right.
multiple aspects of life is really helpful because I think people also just think ADHD is just like related to like your work or being able to study and don't really realize that like it literally impacts every aspect of your life. And so it does
Mhm.
impact food. So I think that's why there's also like a lot of shame around it because we don't really recognize how much of our life can get impacted by having
Yeah.
ADHD. I think society just looks at it in one lens and you're like, no, it impacts all these other things too. That's important. So normalizing it. So that way you're also just not getting all these, you know, not hearing messages from other people or on social media about like, I'm doing something wrong when what you're doing might be what really works for you. And that's okay.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
This is a super random question. In your experience, maybe personally or with clients, like, do you find that people with ADHD will kind of like go through like these phases of like dopamine drops? Like it's like a phase where they're just kind of like low for I don't know, a week or two at a time and that like kind of impacts their eating or no?
For anyone who has a menstrual cycle, I do find that like that luteal, we're just starting to study this, but there is connection between estrogen and dopamine. So our
Okay.
luteal phase in our cycle is when estrogen drops and dopamine will drop with it. Um,
Okay. That makes sense. That's
so
how it feels.
yeah, so it's like leading up to it, it's like for some folks, it's like, oh, my meds don't work as well that week. Or if you have a really good attention specialist or psychiatrist, they might even adjust your meds for that week. There is a little bit of a link between like
Mm,
PMDD and ADHD. So like having really severe premenstrual symptoms. And so for folks who do have that, often they tend to be that week. Like I have friends who don't work, that like they're self-employed. So they're like that week, like
Mhm.
I don't function very well. So I adjust my work schedule to accommodate for
Mhm.
that, because I'm like, my dopamine is so low that I don't really function well. So they're definitely,
Mhm.
I think that's also why ADHD in women has been missed, is because our dopamine levels are fluctuating with our cycles versus men's dopamine. Like they're like they don't have that cycle. So
Right.
they're not experiencing that. So
Yeah, that makes
um,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
like a lot of women will notice when they get to perimenopause or menopause, um, like that missed generation of women, they will get to perimenopause or menopause, and they have been white knuckling it through life, doing all the strategies to function and do the things, and then all of a sudden, all of their tools like aren't working in the same ways anymore, and like often carry a lot of shame around that, and they're like, what
Yeah.
is wrong? Like, what is wrong
Mhm.
with me? I can't remember like these things. I can't do the things I want to anymore, or I'm, turning to food more. And then they
Mhm.
end up getting diagnosed with ADHD, you know.
Yeah, like because that's already happening for a lot of women,
Yeah.
but you didn't know you had ADHD on
So it's
top
like
of it.
magnified. And they're,
Right.
I've had clients who are like, oh, I went to law school, I did all these things, and now I'm like hitting perimenopause or menopause, and like I can't function. What
Mm,
the heck,
right,
Um,
right.
So yeah, they're definitely, I would say that probably if you
Yeah,
notice you have a menstrual cycle and there's like especially that week before your period, if you notice turning to food more often, or like you just feel like your dopamine levels are a lot lower, it's because
yeah.
they are.
That's thanks for sharing that because I knew serotonin would go down when
Yeah,
estrogen goes down, but I didn't think about that with dopamine, but it definitely feels like that. I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's
All
like,
right.
why is my workout just like, meh, like, cool, I did it, but I'm not like, I'm just like, not.
Right.
But then the
Yeah.
week afterwards, I'm like, yeah, that was the best workout ever. And I like, it's like dopamine is just flowing, and you're like, this feels so
No.
good.
I
Uh,
know. And I'm like, is this how a lot of men feel all the time?
so
That's
nice.
okay. It's okay. Oh my gosh. Well, man, Becca, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I love what you're putting out on Instagram too. Are you on other social media platforms also, or is
I'm
that your
on
main?
Facebook and Threads, but that's about it. So,
Okay. So
uh,
Instagram's kind of your hotspot, right?
yeah, like
Okay.
if you want to interact with me and engage with me, that's probably where I'm like the most
Okay.
active.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, we'll link them all up, but like find her on there because I really appreciate your content. You put out amazing educational content. It's practical strategies, but also like fun how you deliver it also. So thank you for that. And then we will link up the book. Is there a specific place you want them to get the book? I'll
My
link it, but
yeah, I
it's
have like
called
a
how?
universal link,
Okay.
so
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
people can
Thanks.
pick. I know that's what my publisher prefers, is you get to pick where you
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
want to purchase from.
Okay.
So
We'll put that in,
also on
but it's
Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and I think bookstore
yeah.
and
Okay,
something.
we'll find out. But
Yeah.
how to eat well for adults with ADHD. Yeah, awesome, Becca. Thank you so much. It's been amazing getting to talk to you a little bit more and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. So thanks for coming on and sharing. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Inside Out Health Podcast. I hope it's been helpful to you in your journey. If you think that it might be helpful to someone you know, please share it with them. Please share on social media. It really helps me grow the show and reach more people with these amazing messages. And if you could be so kind as to rate the show and possibly even leave me a review, that really helps. So much thanks in advance if you do that. And yeah, please subscribe if you want to hear more of this type of content. I have lots of amazing expert guests on the way. All right. Thank you.